Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hi friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to reconnect with Martha Brooke, founder and chief customer experience analyst with Interaction Metrics. Her firm focuses on tapping into the voice of the customer to tease out insights about client organizations. While many small companies have struggled during the pandemic, Martha's firm has been busier than ever gathering feedback about what services are working and not working for customers. Furthermore, she has been helping firms gather insight about their own employees and how this new work environment is affecting them. Homegrown surveys and feedback mechanisms might be more accessible than ever, but are they really asking the right questions without being heavily influenced in the process? I always enjoy Martha's take on the customer experience, and I hope you do too. Hey, Martha, welcome back to Distribution Talk. It's been a little over a year since you've been on. How have you been?
I've been really, really well, Jason. I'm kind of liking this year. What about you?
Well, I can't say that I've been in love with this year. It's gone very quickly for me. I've had to make a lot of changes, but it sounds like you and your business have actually thrived in this environment. So how did that happen?
Look at the stock market. It's just through the roof. So you look at the stock market and you'd say everything is doing well. But I think two verticals in particular are doing well. And one is us and one is not us. So one is technology. You think about Amazon, Facebook, Google, these companies Microsoft, they're just singing. Intel has had a little bit of a rocky road, but they're doing well. And the other vertical that's doing well is information services, media and information services. And we're in information services. I'd say more than information, we're in insights services. But I think for companies like mine, clients are looking for meaningful information from their customers about what they expect and what they perceive and what's going on in the world. And so I think that's really driving the thrivation of our company. Yeah.
For those who did not have an opportunity to listen to the first interview, just quick little soundbite. What does Interaction Metrics do?
Sure. So we're a customer experience research agency, which means that we use a bunch of different methods to find out what's going on between our clients and their customers. So the kinds of methods we use include customer service evaluation and customer interviews, surveys. We do a lot of surveys. And then we do what it sounds very fancy, and it is it's called text analysis. So that's where we go through, all of the verbatims and code them and tag them and turn that into something that's really, really meaningful and not just one-up stories or, one-up kinds of bits of feedback. So thematically organizing that material.
And where are you pulling that data from? Where do you get those things that you are coding and tagging? Where's that coming from?
Occasionally that comes from customer interviews. Sometimes it comes from social media, but mostly it comes from surveys. And it's the survey questions it's the open-ended survey questions like, you rated us this way. How would you improve XYZ? If you were in charge, what would you do here? Those kinds of questions that ask the customer to be more freewheeling, if you will.
Sure. It's interesting, in our last conversation, you really got me thinking about those, intentionally leading questions and how poorly written some surveys can be. And it's really got me thinking about it because I've been around some surveys lately. And it's funny, I've got this critical eye now. I'm looking at these saying, oh, that's not a good question. That's not going to get, it's been fun. I mean, it's been kind of neat. So.
Oh, good. Yeah. I like that for you. Yeah.
Give me an example, some really leading areas that people can get themselves stuck in. And what should you never put in a survey?
You should never do these and it's really common. You should never think of it in terms of what is the answer I want. So in other words, are we doing great in COVID times or, like not good, but really, that's particularly egregious. And we actually see clients wanting to ask that until we explain, well, that's not going to give you scientific evidence. But you see questions like, how satisfied were you with blah, blah, blah. It assumes the customer's somewhat satisfied. Or how likely are you to recommend blah, blah, blah. Well, that assumes the customer's somewhat likely to recommend. Right. So in the ideal world, you get rid of all of those kinds of constructions and really go just much more neutrally for how would you rate the XYZ touch point or the XYZ
Yeah.
contact
Yeah.
or your last call with blah, blah, blah. Just how would you rate it? Nothing like, aren't you happy? Aren't things great? None of that. And that's, whether it's an over the phone survey or just an email survey. We do a lot more email surveys, obviously, or web surveys, but we see other companies all the time with their telephone surveys or interviews doing that leading. So the tone of voice can be so powerful in terms of sounding like you really want the customer to respond in a particular way.
Right. Again, as I've been looking at a few of these, saying, okay, do I already have a foregone conclusion that I'm just trying to back up with a question? And that's what I'm seeing every once in a while and trying to catch myself if I'm asking any kind of question out there.
Right, right. Well, it's just human nature.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, and we can talk about DIY surveys, but one of the reasons to work with a customer experience research company like mine is we don't give a damn.
Yeah.
We're just there to report the evidence. And so we don't have any skin in the game other than providing really actionable insights.
Right.
Whereas you can't help, you're a human, you can't help but to want people to be happy and satisfied and they're going to recommend you and things are good. I mean, think about like our day-to-day conversations. Usually it's like, are things going well? Are things good? That's how we tend to interact.
Sure.
Having a good day, it's just human nature because you want things to be good. And I would say that's a good side of human nature. You want things to be easy and positive. And yet if what you're trying to find out is how your customers perceive you and what their expectations are, this is the kind of information that determines what you're going to invest in as a company. And so it really matters what kinds of the information that you're able to draw out of those questions is sound, that it's provable information. It's not just conjecture or off the top of the customer's head trying to make you feel good about yourself.
Well, it's almost as if you've already created the strategy. You've already invested in the strategy. You've already got everything set up the way you want. And then, let's back this up with a little survey just in case.
Right, right. But that's really the customer insights can, going back to Peter Drucker, your customer is your asset. Really, your customers can lead you if you're willing to let them lead you a bit, not totally. Obviously, you have your own values and where you're going as a company and what your brand is. But I think it's something you talk about a lot, Jason, just being really in dialogue and really allowing the dialogue to determine what happens. The word I like is interaction, of course, because companies interaction metrics. But
absolutely.
But it's like I think it was Ralph Lauren once say, "It's not my lunch, it's not your lunch, it's our lunch." And I just like that. And it was like one of these beautiful pictures of Ralph Lauren in the Hamptons or in Montauk, the beautiful spread. And you're just like, yeah, it's not your lunch, Ralph. It's not my lunch. It's our lunch. And I don't know why it just stuck with me, but it just seems like that's a great way to grow a company is through sharing with customers and finding out what they want and then tweaking your company, not overly, but enough so that it's really truly a dialogue. And I know that we've gotten some great ideas from our customers that have helped forge new paths. So it's powerful stuff, but it starts with being genuinely able to listen without prejudice or bias, really being able to listen to what is the customer saying? What do they want? What do they expect? What's the delta between what they expect and what they perceive with you?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's coming around is why do this in general. I mean, I think that a lot of people rest on their laurels. This has worked for me for a generation, 2 generations or whatnot. And why should I change? Why should I even ask the question? Maybe I just don't. If I'm going to ask the question, I better be prepared to do something about it.
Right. There are companies, clients for whom we know from the outset, they don't really want evidence. They just aren't ready for it. And that's okay. But I guess I go in that direction because if you aren't going to act on it, don't waste your time. Don't waste your money. Don't waste your customers' time. But if you do have the bandwidth to be open, to learn from your customers, if that is part of what you want as your repertoire, then do it well. Then do it well and be ready to allow your research company to really listen and be receptive to the results, and then brainstorm to some extent with your researcher, but to some extent with your team. How are we going to take action? How are we, now that we understand more about what our customers expect from our status updates, from our repairs reports, whatever it might be,
Right.
what are we going to do? How are we going to improve?
And something just dawned on me about timing. It's not only, okay, why do we do this? And I think we can pretty much understand why. And I don't think that would be any mystery to somebody why you would want to ask your customers, how you're doing and how you could improve or whatnot. But I think it's, when is there a natural timing or a natural, almost like a break to say, we really need to invest now in this, some sort of feedback mechanism, whether a customer experience mechanism, or whatever it's going to be. Is there a natural timing or a natural time to implement?
Right. This year is a great time to implement because we have COVID, right? So COVID is a
I've heard of
great,
that. I don't know what that is, but
yeah, yeah,
I've heard of that.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So this is a great time to be finding out about how is, just thinking about something that's super topical, right? Like,
sure.
you want evidence to know, how is this impacting our employees? How is this impacting our partners? How is,
Mhm.
if you have people in a plant, how is this impacting those people? And some of the specific things you want to know are, for those employees who are working remotely, and this could apply to partners too, what do you need from us to make remote better? How can we make remote better?
Mhm.
Rate how we're doing with remote. What would you like to see from remote? As long as we're in remote, what would you like to see that look like? And then there are all the
Mhm.
safety questions. Do
Yeah,
you feel safe when you're visiting our partners? Do you feel safe when you're in the plant? Are you keeping 6 feet of distance? And there are the leadership questions. What are you hearing from our CEO or COO about COVID and our expectations and our plans around COVID? And how, I bring up COVID because our business is doing a lot of COVID surveys right now because
sure.
companies are
Yeah.
interested in that. But it's just such a sea change that will affect us forevermore. Some things we're not going back to. And so this is just a great time to find out, like, how do we set new strategies? How do
Mhm.
we set new strategies that continue to raise the bar on sales and on employee performance?
Assuming that we're not going to have another pandemic next year. Again, thinking about what are those besides this? I mean, this is obviously a very natural one to say, okay, this is a great triggering event that for us to go out and gather feedback. What are some of the other natural, if there are any? I mean, it sounds to me, I mean, obviously you probably should be doing this continuously. You should have this should be a thought out strategy, but where else do you see this happening? When is this being most effectively deployed?
Right. We have clients for whom we do daily surveys. And what the question
Okay.
is generally about is, it's like a tech support or it's a repairs. And the question is, did we resolve your issue?
Okay.
That's the
Okay.
number one. And then we'll have this big dashboard so you can see 93% of the time you're resolving the issue. Great, done and done. What about that 7% of the time? Who needs a call back? What time of day would they like that? Because things are not resolved. So
Right.
now you want to play really good, let's get this fixed, right? And so, what's your phone number? What time of day can we reach you? And tell us a little bit more about what's going on so we get the right guy on the phone to solve this problem. So
Mhm.
anybody who's doing ongoing order support, customer support, tech
Right.
support, repairs, any of that, it's like you want to know right away. So it's not like it's something that's like a project, we do it, done by, it's every day you want to know, who do we need to get back to because they still have an outstanding question, a problem, they're flummoxed. That's such an opportunity to be proactive and pick up the phone or do a chat session or whatever it is, do a Zoom and get
Mhm.
it solved. That's good for business on every single level.
Do you see this? And I can definitely see that daily in those types of environments, thinking more macro type of change inside of an organization. Do you see it in generational change, change of leadership, of ownership? Do you see that occurring?
Right. Like, what are the inflection points where they,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, sure. Well, like for the employee surveys, it could be kind of an every 6 months checking in with employees.
Okay.
For customers, they're basically those ongoing programs. And then there are the bi-yearly or yearly tracking studies. And
Hmm.
that's where you're asking the larger questions that we love are, who do you see as the competitor? What are they doing well? Are there other kinds of the outside of this sort of predictable calendar tracking
Yeah.
study? Are there some inflection points that happen? Sometimes when there's a new group of products that come
Okay.
in.
Yeah,
So
I could
that's
see that.
happened like with
Sure.
one of those sneaker companies in Portland. Yeah.
We only have 2,500 of them, but
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, they had a situation where they were getting a sneaker that just they weren't sure, is this just random chance or why is this coming back to us in boatloads? They'd
Okay.
invested, it was one of those, super expensive branded posh sneakers, and it was out there and it was just coming back in boatloads, and it turned out the messaging around it was wrong. Like it wasn't quite true to
Okay.
size. It was like running a little, I can't remember if it was running a little small or a little large, but by
Okay.
just changing the messaging on their website, they were able to cut their returns in almost half just by saying, hey, this shoe fit is running a little tight, a little narrow, a little big, a little small, whatever it was. So anytime there's a new product, or maybe there's something weird going on with the product, in the case of
Hmm.
the sneakers that were coming back, running shoes, as we call them here in the West Coast, right? Aren't they? But East
You got
Coast,
your
yeah.
East Coast bias
Yeah.
going, yeah.
So, yeah, it's like if something's just awry with the product and you want to know, is this random chance or is it real? Do we have a phenomenon here that we need to deal with?
It's interesting. So product based, I can see that for sure. And I'm thinking again about the listeners that I typically serve here. Maybe opening of a new location or consideration of a new location or something of that nature. I can see that being a fairly large change.
Well, here's one that we've just did. It was a branding. So it's a client who's in the robotics industry and they're
Yeah.
going through this big brand overhaul. And so they wanted from their OEMs and distributors, they wanted feedback about the ad agency comes up with all this clever stuff. Well, what are their engineers here in these clever new taglines that our client is considering? What do they think about this new logo, And so basically the ad agency comes up with multiple directions and our client is like, well, we don't know, and blah blah blah. And I said, well, let's do a survey. Let's find out from your top OEMs and distributors who this is going to impact, right? Like a
Hmm.
distributor wants your branding to be really strong. It helps them
Right.
sell you. So it really matters. What does the OEM think? What does the distributor think? And so that's a great time. Like if you're thinking about rebranding, get evidence from your customers. What do they think of your new direction? And sometimes we'll find the ad agency is so excited about some kind of new naming or new tagline, and the customers are just like, no, no, this will not work. And better to find that out beforehand than after you've dumped a lot of change on this new direction, new websites, new look, new
Hmm.
feel, blah blah blah.
Again, thinking this through, some of these change points, why go through survey? And these are more, data gathering types of things. I think the traditional method has always been, well, let's just have our salespeople go ask. Go ask
Hmm.
their customers. I mean, and that's honestly, that is, I hear that. And I would still say, if I were to really hazard a guess, I would say a majority of the industry that I spend time in, there's a whole lot of that still going on. And why not? Help me defend the data here.
Well, yeah, no, I think that's fine, but don't think that you're getting evidence. Like no one's sitting across a lunch table from you or out for a cocktail or a beer or doing a Zoom session. No one's going to tell you, I have a problem with you. No, it's just not again, not to harp on this, it's just not human nature. Like, no one wants difficulty. No one wants
Right.
problems. I mean, I can't tell you how often in an interview or when we're coding these verbatims, and by the way, we do a lot that's, double blind, anonymous. So no one can find out which customer said this thing or which employee said this
Right.
thing. But yeah, it was just that not human nature to want to tell the truth. But all too often we've seen, employees and customers say, well, if you really want to know what's going on is, and that's the kind of thing you get from research as opposed to taking the guy out to lunch or let's do a
Right.
Zoom. It's too, what do I want to say? The context around that is too upbeat and too casual to really get
And it can be
evidence.
too personal. Nobody wants to offend the other. And, they're playing mental chess at that point too, as to, if I say this, what could happen? That can happen during that type of one-on-one, whereas where it's more anonymous and they can be much more free about that and much more candid about those responses.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not just the human nature thing. Well,
Yeah.
it's sort of human nature, but it's like, really, you want the best price. I mean, I think about taking my car into the dealer or whatever for servicing. And I often have I don't know, it just seems like there's something that isn't good or whatever, but I'm not going to tell them. All I care about is negotiating hard for the best possible price on whatever whatever they are recommending. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I can't get both. I'm not going to strong arm the guy into give me a good price and can I use my 15% off on the blah 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 if and then say, by the way, I didn't think you did a very good job. I wish you'd called me back on I wish
Right.
right? You get one or the other. And
Yeah.
really I'm going for the give me the best price because that's what's in my best interest.
Right.
And I guess that is the the human nature. Like people want what's in their best interest. And
Right.
so that's where research comes in. And data, there's a lot of data. The word that I like is evidence. Like, so what? The
Yeah.
CEO has an opinion or whatever. That's a data point. That's fine. It's not evidence. Evidence is replicable, it's representative, and it's objective, right?
Hmm.
So objective is those neutral questions, free of bias. Replicable means that you get the same result if you did it again. And
Yeah.
representative means these are our OEMs. We want to hear about our OEMs. Now we're getting survey responses from our OEMs,
Right.
right? And the OEMs are different than the end users, different than the distributors. The responses you're getting are representative of those different populations. They're not the rich customers or the poor customers. They're the customers that you're trying to understand. Do you know what I mean? They're not the customers who have time on their hands or not time on their hands. They're the customers that you need to know the most about.
Right. And if I think about trying to gather that kind of information sitting across, the table from someone one on one, you're going to be leading them every single time.
Right.
I guarantee that the words coming out of your mouth, asking questions, you are going to be steering that conversation almost every time.
Why do you think the kinds of clients you work with are because I think based on some conversations we've had,
Hmm.
I think they're a little leery of research. Like they're not using very much research, right? I think they are following the thread of this conversation,
Hmm.
taking the
Hmm.
guy out for a Zoom, right? They're not using research very much. Why do you think that is?
My quick answer and my first thought is that whatever they find out, theoretically, they're going to have to do something about. So there's almost this reluctance to change and the fear of what it's going to cost them to change. So I think that there's a pretty big natural reluctance to gather that information from that standpoint. Is, well, I've been doing things for this way and they've served me pretty well. Man, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to change that bad? I may preach the change in meetings at the company or in front of people, but do I really want to do it? I don't know. That's I've got a pretty good lifestyle here. I don't know if I want to upset the apple cart. So I think
Right.
that's a huge barrier. That would
Right.
be a big, big barrier.
So let me face that square on, and that's to say that oftentimes we uncover really small things. Like I think there is that fear, the fear of like, oh my God, they actually want us to be in a different business altogether.
Right.
Like they
Right.
want us to build an app, right?
Yes.
Oh my God,
Oh
they
my
want an
God.
app, but
Yeah.
they want the website to be more interactive and carry our entire catalog and blah blah blah,
Yes.
right? Okay, well we do hear about that. We hear about a lot of small stuff, like if only James would get back to me on that bid faster, things that actually in an hour could be fixed if you knew what they
Hmm.
were and you were able to go work with James and say, hey, here's what we're hearing from the customers.
Right.
And let's put together a process so you can get those bids out better, faster, easier, whatever it is. So it's not always these huge thing. And especially we'll ask about what are some of the small things that
Yeah.
would make XYZ company better, stronger, faster. So, it all depends on the kinds of questions you ask. I think if you ask sort of a balance of the micro and the macro questions, you're in
Mhm.
good shape.
And I think what can be frustrating, if I really think about this, is that clients ask me all the time, or they state that they want to differentiate themselves from their competition, or how do I differentiate myself? Yet, if you say, well, why don't you ask your customers what they really want? That's terrifying. So they'll say they want to be, unique and different and offer different services or different things, but then they're terrified of having to do that.
Right, right. Well, I'm kind of at a loss for words.
I think that, well, I mean, I tell you, that's the thing that I guess that's kind of frustrating. And again, it's if you really want to differentiate yourselves, you're going to have to ask questions that might be uncomfortable. The answer might be uncomfortable and be
Right.
okay with it. Now, just because they get the information from you doesn't mean they have to act today. And I think, again, that might be another barrier is they feel like they have to do everything today rather than slowing down and saying, okay, what should be the priority going forward? We can phase this in. It doesn't have to be an immediate change, that's going to disrupt our company.
Right. And I think that's the way to think about all change. There's some low hanging, easy fruit, and
Yeah.
let's pick it and eat it, and great. And that's some of what comes out of surveys and customer interview work and service evaluations. I mean, definitely that comes out of it. But then there are the longer term thinking about new product manuals or new product lines. It's not going to happen this month. It might happen over the course of the year, but better to start now than to never start on something that will make you a more profitable company
Mhm.
with stronger customer relationships. I guess one way I think about this work of research, and it's a discipline, it's a mindset, it's work, but one way I think about it is it's about saving and protecting and growing customer relationships. So why not get started on it now? Why wait? And during COVID times is a great time to be finding out more about customers, your customers, and what they want, and who's at risk of leaving us for the competitor, and how can we save that relationship, right? And how can we protect what we have, and how can we grow what we have?
Oh, it's interesting. I kind of the role of the questioning here and the role of going out and gathering evidence. Do you feel like surveying and this evidence-based gathering and the data, this has also been fueled by the rise of the importance of marketing in smaller companies, because previously sometimes people threw sales and marketing together. And in many companies, I still hear those two, what I would consider very separate disciplines. I see them thrown together. But now that you see this emergence of marketing departments in much smaller entities and people coming out of school, they're much more marketing driven. Do you think that fuels the interest in the kind of information that your company provides?
It might. I think there's just an overall increase in awareness of
Mhm.
our relationships and what things look like, and this idea of evolving. Like, this companies cannot stay static anymore. There's
Mhm.
just too much pressure in the marketplace to evolve. So I think there's a number of threads that kind of weave together into this quilt of, I think, the need to evolve. I think just our whole Instagram culture, people are just so much more kind of out there and design oriented and upset when things don't look good or feel good, or they have just these rising expectations. Don't you think that? Like, don't you feel that,
Oh,
Jason, even as a
absolutely.
consumer, that you're just much more critical, and there's just a bunch of factors that come together and weave together to create this sort of constellation of research really getting this evidence matters now. You don't want to be behind the curve. Customers just expect more, and they're going to continue to expect more, right?
To that point, I think about common purchases. I am currently looking at refrigerators,
Uh-huh.
and the amount of research I have
Oh,
done
yeah.
is shocking. I mean, if I step back and say, oh man, how many hours have you put into this? Rather than trusting walking into, a reputable appliance store and saying, tell me what's best for my solution. No, 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 no. I have to go do my research beforehand and I'm going to be just as smart as that person across the table. And yeah, absolutely. I think that that is definitely where at least many of us are, that we have
Right.
to
And so
do
just
that.
much more, yeah, you're much more demanding, aware
Yeah.
kind of customer. So I think that's really interesting in terms of just the sociology of our times, right? Like,
Right.
what is society? And by the way, you like doing all this research, you're late at night, like looking at different configurations for your
Totally.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
But people do that over a coffee maker now.
Yes.
It's just insane. Like they're reading 100 reviews and the temperature of the water and God knows what. But like people do it over the most inane kind of purchase.
Yes. No, it makes it, you're right. I mean, that absolutely makes a lot of sense. So again, thinking about the customers that the distribution client, serves, we would be naive to believe that they are not having those same kind of mental gyrations over everything that they're getting involved with. They want to research. Yeah, it just, interesting.
Well, I think the theme that comes out of this is we're just in these information rich times and
Right.
you can't walk away from that. You can't change the culture. You can't change the society. The best you can do is lead your branch of it, right? But you're not going to change how people are fundamentally what they're demanding and thinking of and how they're operating. So if you're operating like that around a refrigerator, everybody's operating like that. Like I needed a new web vendor. So I'm looking
Right.
at like, at least 5 different options and grilling them and looking at this and this timeline and that timeline and this spec and that spec. And the other side of it is we want to, as companies, gather as much information as we can
Right.
about our customers and their preferences and their expectations and their needs and what would strengthen the relationship. Right. So I think we're talking around the circumference of it, but really the dead center of it is these are, and it almost is like where we started out. It's information services are doing well. And I think we've explored like a little bit about what it is that makes information services so in the center of what companies are looking for right now, right?
Mhm.
They're looking for good technology. They're looking for information they can use and take action on and forge better, stronger relationships with.
And then this really, I mean, again, if you want to come full circle here to what is the customer experience? And I think it ultimately comes down to how do they feel doing when they are doing business with you?
Right. I like that. There are lots of different definitions of customer experience.
Hmm.
Kind of simplest and most obvious. It's everything that the customer interacts with. It's your logo, it's your people, it's your price point. Every aspect of your
Hmm.
company all comes together as the experience, the customer's experience. But I would say on a deeper level, it's also things that the customer doesn't think about, they're not aware of,
Hmm.
but are still impacting them. And that's where sort of the interviews and service observations come in, where we get to know things that are just so small. And yet I always say small isn't necessarily small. The things that
Right.
impact us, I think about Amazon. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's just the tiny, like I'll see a typo. Oh, I'm not buying that product. You know,
Sure.
they
Yeah.
don't care enough about, it's
Yeah.
like this international, and then they don't care about quality. So these small things are not necessarily small. And sometimes I know that I'm not even aware of it, but I'm just like, oh, I'm looking at there's something about that product. I'm going to look at a different one. You know what I mean? I'm not really analyzing it as a consumer. I'm just saying, oh, no, let me look at another one. I don't have confidence in this one.
Yeah, I know that makes a ton of sense. With the small things, and I think that again, if we can go back and look at what's the difference between doing it yourself versus a professional research firm like yours, I really think it's that attention to detail and the lack of assumptions. That might be for me at least, that might be the biggest reason why I would say maybe you shouldn't do that one in house.
Right, right. I think there's also, isn't it nice to be served up with the charts and like, why do you want to make the charts and the graphs? And why do you want to bubble all of this up into a presentation? Or why do you want to figure out a dashboard? I can tell you all these things take a lot of time and some of it's tedious.
Yeah.
Don't you want another company to just do it for you? I mean,
Absolutely. Oh
it,
yeah. Oh
that's the
yeah.
same thing about our WordPress site. That's why I'm out looking for a new web vendor. Or actually, I think I found one, but I guess I could. It's WordPress. I guess I could figure it out. I don't want to do that. Like
No.
that's not a good use of my time. Yeah. So I think there's something just about it's hard enough. It's going to be hard enough to like create actions around. That's how you should task yourself as a
Yeah.
company. We want to create the actions around these insights, around this evidence, not like actually package it together. It's just not a good use of anybody's time. It's what we're there
Yeah.
for.
Well, and I think that, yeah, there's the magic of the third party. This is something that I've come to realize over the, really prior to me coming into this entity, to the consulting services side, really looking at that person, there tends to be this magical figure that comes in, the consultant or the advisor, that may even say the exact same things that the owner, president, or manager has been saying over and over again. But all of a sudden they say it in slightly different verbiage and, maybe 3-syllable words or something like that. And all of a sudden it's, wow, yeah, that's exactly what we have to do. It's this weird magic. And I think that, really there's something special about that to help people in the organization get comfortable with different ideas and different changes, that sometimes that outsider is really, it's nice to have.
Right. The only thing that I would add to that is it's more typical that it's the CEO, the president, whatever, is using the 3-syllable word, and the consultant comes in with the 1-syllable word.
Very good
Like
point.
they
Yeah.
cut through all the clutter, all
Yes.
the
Yeah.
noise,
Good
all the
point.
BS, and they're just like, oh, you mean you're trying to say it's fun? You're trying to say
Yeah.
whatever it is. And so that's where sometimes it's like the outsiders coming in with it, and it's clarifying.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go.
It's just
Yeah.
clarifying. I think there's a fear that this stuff is going to cost an arm and a leg,
Yeah. Totally agree.
because don't you work with smaller companies?
I do. Generally speaking, yeah. It depends. It's a range. I tend to find that there are people that might be under 20 million in revenue or under 30 million in revenue and terrified about taking on something as sophisticated as you're bringing to the table.
Right. So it's really not, surveys are not expensive.
Right.
Interviews can get pricey because they take a lot of time. And the way we do it is with
Oh, I remember.
like
Oh,
really
yeah.
professional. Yeah, with it. Yeah, because you did them
Yes.
with us,
Yeah.
right? It's like where we're
I
sending
hired
an
you all
email
to do
and
it. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So it's like a calendar invite and this and that. And obviously most customers won't go ahead with the interview, right? So there's the what's our response level, and then the whole setup, and then we even send a thank you after the interview.
Mm-hmm.
All of that, just that makes it a nice experience for everybody. And it makes the client look good. They're really invested in this and they really care. And if they're doing interviews, they do. So I guess the point there is they take a lot of time, so they can be expensive. But surveys, no. I mean, we do these all day long. It's really not that expensive. Like you could do something for very little amount of money, especially the COVID surveys. Like COVID surveys, we have a bank of questions set up.
Yeah.
And we'll write new questions if we're not covering what the client wants to know, but it's set up, it's ready to go. We have things that are a few $100s a month, like it does not have to be expensive. We have things that are a lot more than that, but we already have the software licenses and everything. So it does not have to cost an arm and a leg at all. And some evidence, I would say not all data is worth gathering. But if you can gather some evidence, it's always worth it. Even if you can only get a little evidence, even if you could only do, say, one tracking study every 6 months or something like that, that's worth it.
Yeah. Well, and I think it leads to buy-in. If you have this piece of, this evidence that's been gathered outside of the firm, I think it always lends a little more credibility, especially to the people that work with you and for you inside the organization, that they're going to buy in because this was gathered in a more professional manner.
Right. Well, then there's the other, like you can repurpose this. You could put it, supposing you find out 95% of our customers rate us a 9 or above with a scale of 10, say 9 or above on customer satisfaction. Let's take that chart, put it on your website.
Yeah.
Right? Like now you're using your evidence, and we didn't say it. We hired a professional, and you can name us or not. That doesn't matter. But the point is, an outsider came up with this, was able to derive this evidence about our customer's experience. So put it on the website, celebrate it. And if you're a larger company, share it with your stakeholders. And if you're a publicly traded company, put it in your annual report. It's like that is where another way to reap dividends from the investment in research-driven evidence.
It's funny. Yeah, and that's just instantly came to mind was J.D. Powers.
Right.
Instantly it just popped in there. Of course, they're going to throw that all over the place.
Right.
And I don't know anything about JD Powers, but boy, they sound pretty cool. So, of course, I'm like, well, if they said so, well, sure. Yeah, that sounds
Right.
much more credible. Yeah.
Right. Oh, absolutely. So JD Power is an interesting company. They're still really mostly known in the car industry, and
Yes.
they do some
Yes.
really tragically long surveys, I might add. But what they really are, this is interesting, what they really are is an advertising agency. So you pay, I can't remember what it is, but it's in the millions that you pay for the plaque that says,
Yes.
and JD Powers certifies you as rated 4 out of 5 in customer satisfaction or whatever. So in that way, they've gotten ahead of over their skis in a sense, in that what started as a research company for the car industry became an advertising agency for the world. And that said, I think that they do some things really, really well, especially in their core sectors.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I guess I bring that up just because it's like, are we buying the plaque or are we buying insight? And I think that's a good question for your clients to be thinking about when they're thinking about research. Is it mostly about we want the graph on our website that says 95% of our customers rate us 9 or above on a scale
Yeah.
of 10? Is it mostly that, or is it, and which is fine. That's sometimes we're used that way, and that's totally fine. That we did this, it's replicable, it's representative, it's objective. That's fine. Or is it to gather insight? And I bring that up because it's important to have that conversation up front about how do you want to use this? What's the purpose of this evidence? Do you know what I mean? Why are we doing this?
Right.
And sometimes that can be like, well, what we really care about is going back to tech support, order support. Did we resolve your issue? And just being really real time with customers. And that's the best way to use evidence. And sometimes it's really about understanding more strategic issues about the brand and about growth opportunities. And sometimes it's simply about the chart that says 9 out of 10 customers recommend us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. And I do appreciate the thought, though, of taking that information and repurposing it other places. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, like you could even post it, put it up on your vehicles driving down the road,
Right,
something
right,
like that, just some
right.
sort of deal, or on your business card or something of that nature. But one last thing, you said you did a lot of COVID surveys and a lot of COVID studies, and, you've run that trail, probably run that since, April, something like
March.
that, March.
Yeah, yeah,
It's right
yeah. End
away.
of
Okay.
March.
You've been on
Yeah.
that wave for a while. So it's been a good wave. If somebody wants to continue doing more of these, have they already missed the boat? Is it already, this is old news now? I mean, is it,
Oh
or
God, no, 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 no,
keep
no. Because
going? Okay.
yeah, keep going because you want to constantly get a read on how are our employees doing,
Okay.
what do they need from us, what do our partners need from us, are we safe? Like it's the kind of thing where, and interesting, some of the response rate on these COVID surveys is through the roof. Like we've had
I would
response rates.
imagine so.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
unbelievable. Like
Yeah. Nothing like a good pandemic
yeah,
to kick
nothing
up
like a good pandemic. Yeah, but
kick up participation.
partners, customers, employees, they want you to know here's what's going on for me, and here's the questions I have for leadership. Here's what I'd like from leadership. And it's definitely, and unless something's very different than I think of, we're in this for,
A bit.
well, I
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
a bit. Let's
Yeah.
just say a bit.
Yeah. A bit.
6 months, a year, I don't know. But then there'll be after COVID and how it's really affected how we do business. Questions of is virtual as good as face to face? That's a question
Right.
that we ask all
Oh
the
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
You're like, great. How, do you want to keep virtual and having evidence behind that rather than just assuming that everybody wants to keep virtual, that no one wants to go into the office anymore? It really depends on who you are and what your role is, whether you want to go in. Because we've heard CEOs or top management people saying, oh, everybody's good with remote. This is the way of the future. And then the frontline people are like, oh, dear God, like, when is this over? And
Right.
how can you help me? And this is terrible. This is a nightmare. I'm working out of the corner of my bedroom. Actually, not
Yes.
even that, in the closet of my
Yeah.
bedroom under
Oh, I know people who hate
yeah,
it. Hate it.
yeah,
Couldn't
yeah.
wait to go back can't wait to get back into the office full time, or they're just doing it anyway. Oh yeah.
Right.
I know people like
Yeah.
that. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's easy to make generalizations and just assume, oh, I love this, that
Okay.
everybody loves it. And it's just not true. And what's usually true, Jason, is it's true for somebody,
Yes.
true for some groups.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, our job is to find out which groups and how much and to what extent and what can you do to make it easier and
Hmm.
what's it going to look like in terms of the future and what people are expecting in terms of their roles and travel. And I think it's going to, it's obvious to say it's upset the airline industry and how much
Sure.
we travel because blah, blah, blah. But I think there are other things like safety, just how people comport themselves.
Hmm.
I wonder, I think things will change years out, but I just wonder, I don't know, like this mask thing. I just wonder if our whole sense of how we relate to people has, and our whole sense of germs
Yes.
is just different than, and will for the next, I won't, nothing's forever, but for the next several years, our whole sense of hygiene and germs and masks and physical closeness, it's just different. And it's, you want to know about that. You want to know
Yeah.
about that in your business. And more than just what is this like for companies at large? It's like, what is it like for our company in our state, in our town,
Hmm.
for our people? And in their own words, what is that experience?
It's interesting. Speaking of the mask thing, I lived overseas. I lived in Japan for a while, and in Asia, masks were pretty prevalent, especially with older people when they would get a cold or flu or something like that. That they would wear masks. It was very common. I always thought it very strange, and then now it's okay. And I never thought that would actually be adopted here in the States. I never could have imagined that would be adopted here, and then here we are. And now it's normal. I mean, I feel naked sometimes walking to a store and forgetting something. It's like, wow, very
Right,
strange. And again, that's only 6 months, 7 months,
right, right,
that has come on, and what a tremendous impact that's made just on me. But if you think about in your organizations, what does safety look like today? And what does interaction with other people feel like? What should that look like in the future? I mean, you're absolutely right. And maybe that was a softball question as to whether these things are done, these types of surveys are done yet. I think it's something that is going to go on for a while. Yeah.
right, right. And with any kind of evidence gathering, you want the before, the during, and the after, right?
Hmm.
It's not like just once is better than nonce,
Yes.
but
Yes.
but you know but yeah, you want to know where you stand and where things are going and then where things have been.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to an original comment I made about marketing, that as people recognize the importance of marketing and willing to spend money on marketing and branding and really then it's information gathering as well. This is, in my opinion, this is part and parcel with that. This is never ending. This is something that you are constantly touching and going out and asking questions.
Right, right. And then, you want to do it in different ways. And that's why we're not just a survey company, why we do the interviews,
Yeah.
why we do service observations where we'll take recordings of calls and
Right.
chats and
Right.
emails. And we have criteria that we evaluate that against. And it's really can be very high impact evidence. So just using different methods to find out what's going on in customers' minds and what
Yeah.
is the experience.
Yeah. And previously when we talked, I say, no, there's no way these guys would ever record phone calls and do that. Not so sure anymore.
Right.
I think that assumption is definitely out the window, that is a possibility today. And that's something that maybe, distributors really do, smaller entities do need to look at as something that is going to augment their gathering of evidence.
Right. Right.
All right. Well, hey, we have gone on and talked about this whole thing, but totally appreciate you coming on again. It's always a pleasure to get your insights.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I tell people where to go to find out more?
Nah, that'd be too easy. Okay. Okay.
Oh,
Okay. Go ahead.
okay.
Tell me,
Yeah,
where
yeah, yeah.
could people find you if they want
Yes.
to learn more?
Yeah, so I'm Martha Brooke, Brooke, and they can link me in and ask me a question through LinkedIn or send an email to hello at interactionmetrics.com. So interaction like we're having an interaction, Jason, and
Hmm.
metrics, metrics like the number. We do
Hmm.
have 5 principles for better customer listening on our website. So
Yeah.
just if people want to read something, learn a little bit more about what the customer listening project looks like,
Hmm.
that's kind
Hmm.
of a good way to get one's feet wet. And I love questions. One of my callings in life
Yeah.
is to bring science to the customer experience field and really get clients more evidence-based. And sometimes along the way, there's just a lot of questions, and I'm there to answer them.
Absolutely. And no, I couldn't
Yeah.
agree more. I think that's something, I tend to probably give away a little more than I probably should, but it's okay. And I'm glad you said calling, because that's how I feel as well.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
definitely we're here to serve, and this is the way we do it.
Right.
Right on.
Right.
Thank you so much for coming on the show as always. And really enjoyed the follow up conversation, because I think this is something that the listeners for the show really do need to take a good look at going forward.
Excellent.
All right.
All right. Bye for now, Jason.
Take care. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.